Alright, what's up YouTube? It's been a while, but I finally got back to it. So we're gonna do a little documentation. So for those that have never made it to this point, probably should reference some other videos around YouTube and maybe a few of my last ones. Unfortunately, I haven't been so good about documenting the actual images and recording of removal of the transmission and some of this other stuff, but it's out there. It's a pain in the ass, but it can be done. So one thing off rip I recommend is purchasing the E10 external Torx socket that is required. 5/16 and an 8mm will fit, but if you're unlucky like me, you will strip it, and I did. So I'm going to cross that road after this video, but I'm replacing with just a OEM replacement LUK brand. I've got a pressure plate not a throwout bearing rather, but a slave cylinder, alignment tool, and the clutch here, and I've got a brand new LUK brand flywheel as well, and I've documented all the part numbers. I'll share all this information out. So this is where I'm at right now. I got to get the rest of these bolts out, and then we'll talk a little more about putting this stuff back together once I get it out. But one good sign is all the material laying on the floor from my impact. That shows me that this truly was the clutch and not another problem with like a weak pressure plate or a shitty slave cylinder or something. You don't want to find that it's something small after digging all this way and buying all these parts. So anyways, to touch base on where we're at, what I got going on. So shouldn't be too bad. I just got to get that one bolt out. One thing I will note on is I've talked to a few people that have done it. They recommend holding the crank with a socket on this side versus trying to use a pry bar or some kind of unless you have a bolt-on flywheel tool, a socket with a breaker bar kind of pried up against something in there to hold it while torquing the flywheel to crankshaft bolts is probably the best way to go about it. And I also read it should be about 39 foot-pounds plus 25 degrees with blue Loctite on the 8 bolts that go to the flywheel to the crankshaft. I could already imagine that it'd be a severe pain in the ass to set up a torque indicator gauge inside of there and zero it out with all that. So I've been told it's not that critical, so we're gonna overshoot the foot-pounds, probably do 2 or 3 passes and just go a few foot-pounds past and call it a day. So that's where we're at. I'll see what we can do to get this bolt out. Probably gonna slam a socket on it, grab it with some vice grips, maybe even just cut it off. I've got some other hardware here that I think I might be able to use. So I'll dig through some more of that. Look into what kind of grade these bolts are and such. I do know that they are stretch bolts and they're supposed to be replaced. So if I can't come up with a good fix, I'm at least gonna get this piece of shit apart, and I'll probably order some ARP brand replacement bolts for it, or whatever I might be able to find. So with that being said, if that's the road taken, I will also document part numbers and stuff off of that stuff, and I'll compile a price list of everything that I've spent up to, from start to finish with everything that I've done, including a used 5th gear set. So that's where I'm at right now. I've got it set up. Probably not the best way to do this at the moment, but it's actually resting on the jack stand, so I'm not going to disturb this. I'm going to let it ride. And then once we get that apart, we'll take some attention over to the slave cylinder here, get that J-pipe loose off of it, and we'll try to go ahead and remove that and see what we can do about putting the new one back on and such things like that. So I'll be recording another video here shortly. I'll probably stick 2 of these together with some pictures and stuff, and I'll put it out there for you guys, but this will not be the last. I'm not going to get the transmission in today, so within another week or 2, we'll have the rest of the parts together and the car hopefully back on the ground. I've got some lowering springs that I bought for it. I don't know if those will make it on there yet, because I also do know the car needs a timing chain set, or a tensioner at least. So right now the goal has changed just to get it back on its wheels and mobile, because I have to get the hell out of this garage, and it's going to be a task. The whole house, I don't care about. It's just this place here is not going to be fun. So, on a personal note, that's why. And as far as the purpose of this video, it's to help, as I always say, help the next guy along. You know, there's more than one way to skin a cat. As long as you end up with the correct results, I feel it doesn't matter how you get there. But there is a lot of people out there that are willing to share their information. These cards have a huge following, so if you don't have a Facebook or an Instagram and you're lost and you're just digging through forums after forums and YouTube videos after YouTube videos, I highly recommend joining a Facebook page or an Instagram, Cobalt, Ecotech, something or other along those lines, and just reach out to people. That's where I found the core of the information that I found most useful. The internet has such a plethora of different information from different people with different experiences with different types of cobalt super sports. So 2 liters, 2 2s, 2 4s, LNFs, LSJs. You know, there's so much information out there, and there's so many different parts. So it's one thing I found is to find somebody that's got a similar car to you. And I bet if you know, you can tell through pictures and stuff that they've done a lot of things to their car, you can almost guarantee they're going to have answers as far as repairs. So that's been my most resourceful tool, and again, just to share this out there. I know it's not the best way to present this information, but who knows? If it helps one person, it's what the purpose of this shit is for. So I'll be back shortly, hopefully with a flywheel exposed. So I'll check back in a minute. So, got the clutch off the flywheel. There's the damage. Probably just gonna get new bolts. So from here, this is what it looks like. It's actually not in the absolute worst condition, but it's pretty fucked up. So, welcome to the trash can. Okay, so now that we're to this point, we're gonna see about ripping that flywheel off there, and we'll go from there. All right, guys. So, gone through some hoops since I started this afternoon. So in a nutshell, we've got all the old parts out. Already got them stacked up, so I'll put pictures, but everything was burnt. Hot spots on the pressure plate and flywheel. I'm glad that I replaced everything. So with that being said, I wasn't smart and I didn't go get an E10 Torx socket. So I found a 5/16, 12 point whatever that fitted good. Got all the bolts out except for one. I didn't have my impact fully seated on the bolt, and I stripped it right out. So once you get in there, you'll realize there's no room for this stuff. So I tried to get a pair of vice grips on the head of the bolt between an opening, and obviously wasn't going to happen, but I figured it was worth a shot. And also with that, you smash it to a different shape, so I was hoping to be able to slam a smaller socket on it. So out of all the different bits I got, I didn't find anything that was close enough to beat it on there. So what I did instead was I drilled out the center of the bolt, which I got one right here. So it'd make it easier if you got a center punch and you can really get it close to the center of it. But I just took a very, very small drill bit, probably about a 2mm drill bit. I don't know what the standard for that. Something 64s, but anyway, and just stepped it out until I got the drill size around the head, the bottom head of the bolt there, the ring around it. And then it took some persuasion with a chisel and a hammer, but I finally got the collar to split from the head of the bolt. And it's actually still stuck in the old flywheel. I don't know if it's right up front. So I'm covering this specifically because I happen to have a lot of hardware, metric hardware specifically, and Chevy uses a lot of metric stuff. So I just happen to have a hex-headed 8/8 grade, I believe it's a zinc-coated bolt. So my concern was I don't know what the grade of the original bolt is. In fact, we'll have a harder look here. I don't think it's stamped on there anywhere. My camera won't focus, of course. Yeah, it doesn't look like it. So, if you plan on reusing these bolts, which it's suggested to replace everything, I reused the flywheel to crankshaft bolts. Just make sure you Loctite it up real good, clean everything out real good. So the main point of this, bringing all this up, is I was concerned that I shouldn't use these hardware that I've got because of rotational force on the pressure plate side. Well, I realized that the pressure plate is really just a housing. It doesn't really absorb any of the force like the flywheel does. So with that being said, it's also pinned. There's 3 dowel pins from the flywheel that kind of capture and locate somewhat the clutch and pressure plate assembly. So, you know, better look at it. There's a pin, there's a pin, there's a pin. So, with the understanding that those pins are there, it's extra security to put these bolts in there, because if it was just the bolts, I would probably wait and replace with an ARP brand or something. But I do know where these bolts came from. I used to work for a German CNC grinding machine manufacturer, and whenever we cleaned the house, they were just throwing that stuff away. So this is all from Germany, German grade. You know, it's part of a $2 million machine, so I wouldn't imagine that this bolt's a piece of shit, some China garbage like what comes with your eBay headers and your fucking yin yang eBay spinny thing turbo, right? So with all that covered, I'm gonna go ahead and it looks like I got about the same depth. These are supposed to be M8 by 15s, so there's the side view, right? Take my calipers there, and that's just about to the bottom of it. So we're about 11 millimeters, 11.5 millimeters into the flywheel. And if you don't have a pair of these calipers, $20 at your local parts store or Amazon, whatever, it is a great investment. If you're not doing precise machinery work or anything like that, and you're just dicking around the house like I am here, this tool is so beneficial for checking things like what I just did. I just stuck this end in that hole. For those that don't know, I might be sounding like a jackass to people that do this for a living, but it's just a quick, easy way to crunch numbers down to make sure your stuff's gonna work. So that hole is 16 millimeters deep. Of course, it's not truly, you couldn't take a 16 millimeter bolt and shove it in there because there's a taper at the bottom of it. But that number there tells me I've got plenty of real estate for the bolt hanging out of this pressure plate, right? In fact, with this being 16 millimeters and this one being 11 millimeters, I could probably find a longer bolt, but it's not going to be necessary due to the fact that the original bolt is also just about, oh, it's actually shorter. So we're already better. This is about 1093, 11 millimeters from the bottom of the pressure plate to the tip of the bolt where it will be inside the flywheel. So that's where we're at. I'm gonna slap this stuff back together with the alignment tool. One more step I do have to complete that I found that it's suggested to do. Don't skip this part. I wanted to find a way around it. The torque spec to the flywheel bolts there is 39 foot-pounds plus 25 degrees. So I got this torque angle gauge at Advanced Auto, AutoZone, whatever the parts store was. I think it was about 20 bucks or so. So the problem I was having with, I didn't want to use it. I was just gonna up the torque to like 45 pounds, but this shit's engineered, right? It's supposed to be that way. So I found that the pin that it comes with actually does work out. I don't know if I can get it up in here with one hand, but this is essentially what it'll look like. You catch a hole with the angle gauge, and you also can line it up to a bolt. So it'll take some finesse and laying under the car to do all of them, and it's time consuming, but it's worth spending the extra 20 minutes of frustration for that instead of, you know, a couple months later, even though those bolts are Loctited and torqued to spec, some god-forsaken freak chance that it backs out a little bit, and now you get a loose flywheel, or if the bolt backs out enough, it runs into the clutch and just all kinds of mess. So to avoid any of that slight possibility, it's worth it to just go ahead and grab those things if you don't already have them and do it the way it's suggested. And I bought that angle gauge for doing the motor in the Tahoe, and here it is benefiting me here. So later on down the road, it's a good investment. Same as those digital calipers. In fact, if you pony up a few extra dollars, you can get a digital caliper readout that actually measures in thousandths of an inch and will also convert to fractions as well as millimeters. Mine's not that precise and it's not that fancy, but it gets my job done. So I also wanted to note real fast, I mentioned earlier in this video that I didn't know how I was going to hold the flywheel to torque the bolts. Well, talking to another guy, and this crossed my mind, but I wasn't sure if it would be okay. I don't know the torque spec on the harmonic balancer bolt there, but I do know on my truck it was north of 250 foot-pounds, so I would imagine it's on there pretty good. And I think the way I'm spinning it, that would, yeah, it would loosen the bolt spinning the flywheel that I am. But being only 39 foot-pounds, this setup right here is hands-free. You don't have to have a buddy. You don't have to try to jam a pry bar into the flywheel teeth, potentially damage it, or have it come flying out, smack you in the face, piss you off. You just rig this up, go back over to the other side, and turn the crank until you hear the wrench touch. And hopefully it stays in place. I had to move it a few times. I kept getting a little bit of spring back with the compression in the cylinder. So once I got it in the right spot, it stayed there. It's nice and sturdy, so I don't have to worry about that either. One thing to note that some of you may experience, probably a rare scenario, I cleaned off the end of my engine block with a can of brake parts cleaner because there was a lot of clutch material in there. So I thought I wiped it off pretty good, blew it off with air real fast, and I walked away, and I came back and I threw my new flywheel up in there, and I got all 6 bolts in, and I ran them in with my impact, and I was taking a break, getting my torque wrench stuff ready, and I come back and there was a spot that looked just like oil on the ground here. My concern was that I sprayed the rear main seal with brake parts cleaner, which could be corrosive, but that's just insane if it was immediately ruined the gasket immediately like that. So what it ended up being was just a little residual fluid kind of caught around that rear main seal, and also in some of the crevices in the engine block. So if you do clean your engine, don't freak out. I was immediately concerned, started looking up some other things, what it could possibly be, because I don't have time or money for this to have any other mistakes. So just something to note on. Just take your time, be patient, be attentive, very, very detail oriented with this kind of stuff. This is the serious part, right? So you can rip and tear it apart as much as you want, as long as you're comfortable with keeping track of where your bolts go and stuff like that. And as far as safety is concerned, I'm a big safety freak. So to get to this point, there was a lot of shifting jack stands around. There's a lot of moving the engine hoist. There was, test it here, try it there. I don't like this, I don't like that. Oh, I can't work on it this way. So I rearranged the setup underneath this car probably 7 or 8 times just to get to this point here. And right now I'm kind of screwed as far as putting it together myself, because the wheels of this jack, if I take another jack and roll it in here, they'll actually butt up wheels before I can stroke the transmission up. It's way too far away, and not to mention the way it's shaped and where I'd have to grab it. It'd pretty much be on the front of the bell housing. So again, another issue is we can't physically get there because the jack's in the way I have it set up. But there's always ways around that. I've got a crane over here, so I'm thinking what I'll do is I'll probably set it up quick, and I might take the handle off my jack, and I'll probably cradle the put the legs of the hoist around the jack, and I'll grab the mounts off the top. I'll get this jack out of the way, and I might use this little bottle jack that come in the Tahoe. I've used this on every transmission swap I've done with the truck. I used it numerous times during the frame swap, and I never would have thought this little puny little jack would be so crucial to what I have to do on my vehicles. And one extra little note on this that might help somebody else out in the future if I can find it is the fact that the bar that comes with the truck, the lug nut wrench, has a flat-headed tip that you're supposed to stick in there to turn this thing. Well, as you can see, it moves slower than a fucking snail, right? So to do it by hand is just unethical. But if you do have a nice half-inch size or so chisel, you can chuck it up in your DeWalt drill, whatever you got, and you fucking full ball it, and it will come out real fast. But I do suggest using setting your clutch relatively low, because when it reaches the end of its stroke, it snaps pretty hard. So anyway, just to touch on that real quick tip, that's pretty much all I got for right now as far as details. I've been trying to stick and remember to record some of these things that I'm doing. I have not seen anything on the internet about using other bolts other than an ARP or maybe a GM genuine part, but apparently these are, I don't believe they're torque to yield bolts, but they're some kind of stretch bolts. And if my camera could focus, there was one bolt that you could actually see on the threads. It might be this one. It's right at the top. Yeah, maybe not so. And it also could have been optical illusion with a little bit of Loctite left on it yet. It could have looked like it was spread open a little more. But anyway, with all that being said, we're going to go ahead. I'll get the alignment tool ready. I'll get the clutch up in there, put the pressure plate on, start some bolts in it after I do the torque angle on this. And then if there's still enough time this evening, I'm going to go ahead and take a look at the slave cylinder here. So if I get those things done that I just listed off, the next time I come here, I should be ready to have a buddy come with me, and we'll just pick that thing up, stick it right in the car, make it up to the top trans mount there, and then for the rest of it, as some of you may know, it's probably about an afternoon's worth of work. It goes back together a little easier than it comes apart as far as the subframe and all that other stuff. You got to be real careful that you don't take stuff apart the wrong order and have something fall or break, whatever. So I spent a long time taking my car apart because couldn't find any really good videos, good information. At that point in time, I wasn't talking to anybody on the internet about it, so I was trying to figure it out myself. And as I mentioned, I'm a safety freak, so I was very, very, very careful, and it was a long, painstaking process. But knowing what I know about it, it should fly back together. So yeah, that's going to be the main bitch. We're going to get the transmission back in and go as far as we can, and then it'll be one more weekend or day after that to go ahead and slap the subframe in, tie up the struts, all the control arms, all the plastic, all the bumper, the headlights, everything that I've got taken apart here. And another thing is the starter. For many of you that some of you might not know, and those that do, that starter is a fucking pain in the ass to get in and out of there. So just kind of watch out for that. I don't really have any good suggestions. You're gonna need a universal and a couple extensions, and I think a buddy of mine, he was over here. I got fed up and crawled out underneath the car. He ended up taking a 1/4-inch drive with an adapter to 3/8 with I think it's a 17 or 18 millimeter socket, and he was able to get it out with his little hand down in there like that. But I fought it for a long time. It's hard to get the wires off of. It's hard to get some of the last bolts out of. It's part of the bell housing, right? So it's very, very difficult. It's packed in there pretty good underneath the car. And not to mention, there's all kinds of crap in the way. So if you're not taking your car apart any further than this, I would say be prepared, because there's no good way to get to it. It's on the very, very bottom. And another thing I would suggest, if you can see my jack stand back there, it's on its lowest setting. Also, again, part of me being a safety freak. I highly recommend getting your car up as high as possible. Once it's on stands, for the most part, it ain't gonna go nowhere. But it's just something that I don't like messing with safety. So there's the starter hole. This bracket here holds, I believe this, I don't know if that's the coolant pump for the supercharger or not. I'm pretty sure that is. And these are the Bosch supercharger liquid cooled pumps that like to go out at about 60,000 miles. I don't think mine's ever worked since I own the car. So that's something we'll be taking care of in the future. Although I do plan on selling this thing, I do want it running and looking as best as it possibly can. So, just to give you a little sneak peek, there's the starter hole, and there's the cavity you got to get it out of. And it might be a little easier to go ahead and take that whole bracket off. I opted not to, but you'll find for yourself what works best. So, as for right now, that's about it. The only other thing I can think of is if I could do this starting over from scratch. Of course, it depends on the financial situation, but I would also recommend doing the spread bar across the top of the motor. Your only difficulty will be is once you get the subframe out from underneath the car, you will need to use a jack to lower the motor down. But once it's in this position, I don't know if you can tell, this right side is definitely way lower. I mean, I could recognize it. It doesn't look right to me, right? So that's about where it needed to be to get the trans off the end of it. But once it's in that position, it's better to be able to chain it off of some kind of spreader bar. And reason being, I've never seen any kind of hydraulic piston jack that doesn't bleed off. I mean, I don't care what it is, brand new out of the box, if you spent $500 on it, what have you, I'm not going to trust it, and especially somebody else's jack. I've had this thing here for a long time, and I've always been really careful with it, and wouldn't you know, by the time I got back over here, it was about an inch or so off the oil pan. And my only option for the jack stand was what you see right now. It's kind of jammed in the foot of the jack up against the block. So it was wedged in there. It wasn't going to go anywhere. But my point is, if you just leave this on a jack, or the crane for a matter of fact, it will bleed off, it will move, and I don't know how far it would take to start breaking shit, but I don't want to find out, and I'm sure nobody else does either. So, with all that being said, that's probably going to be the end for the video for tonight. I'll stick some pictures at the end of this of the clutch being installed on the new flywheel, and then we'll probably fire back up next weekend to finish her up the rest of the way. I'm also going to note on bleeding the clutch, I still don't know about the procedure. From my understanding, the clutch fluid is the brake fluid, and it's all run off the master cylinder for the brake, is what I understand, or at least the reservoir. I could be completely wrong about that, but I'm not sure yet. But we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. I'll also document changing that slave cylinder as well. That's something else I don't know about, and also I haven't seen a whole lot of information about. So I'm excited to put this stuff out there. I hope somebody along the way, even if it's just a quick reference for, just to see something for whatever you're working on. So anything I can do to help, I like sharing this stuff as I'm figuring it out. As I've said before in other videos, I'm no master mechanic. I'm not ASE certified. I've been to college it was a auto diesel college, but I learned there that I didn't want to fix people's broken shit for a living because I already have to fix mine. So, alright guys, I'll stick a few photos at the end of this like I mentioned, and we'll get back to it next weekend or the weekend after, but we'll definitely see this thing through before the month's end. So bear with me, I got more coming. Thanks guys.